Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Area 312 Rock and Metal Podcast. I'm your host, Kent, along with my co-host,
Rex.
And our other co-host,
Mike.
From the legendary Christian rock and metal band Novella. Jonathan, it's a pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
You bet. So are we. It's been a long time. We don't always get the news in the Christian rock and metal circles, kind of like in the mainstream. And we've often wondered, because Novella was such a great band that ministered to us, brought some great, very unique musics. There were some progressive tendencies in the albums, and hard rock and metal based, and often wondered what happened to this great band Novella after A Liquid Earth dropped. So we're going to get into all that.
Okay.
Jonathan, thank you again for being here. And we always like to start at square one. If you don't mind, sir, just please tell us a little bit about how you grew up. Did you come from a musically inclined family?
Yes and no. My father was a violinist. He played, and he was the orchestra leader at the church that he grew up in Italy. I say no because when I was growing up, he didn't play the violin that much. My musical interests, I don't want to say came out of nowhere, but pretty much it was just me. I got three sisters. None of them are musically inclined. I have the sister that's a year younger than me. Her and I would sing in youth group once in a while. But that's the extent of it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so Jonathan, since you were saying your dad played violin, but not so much an inclined family, then what first attracted you to music, whether a particular band, artist, or instrument?
Well, my parents had me started on piano lessons when I was 9 years old. Okay, me and my sister. After a year, she dropped it. I continued on with it. And then even after the lessons stopped, I was the kid that was at the piano all the time, creating little musical pieces. And my big influence at the time was Keith Green. I really grew up listening to the pioneers of Christian music. So Keith Green, Phil Keaggy, Second Chapter of Acts, Randy Stonehill, Love Song, Chuck Girard. I mean, those were my influences. I come from a very devout Christian family. And so listening to rock and roll music was not encouraged. Let's say it that way. I'm not going to say not allowed, but as a matter of fact, I remember one day I was listening to Phil Keaggy. My mother rushes in the room and says, "Turn off that secular rock music." And I'm like, "Mom, that's Phil Keaggy." So I don't want to say it was limited. I don't want to say that I felt like I missed out, because as I got older and into high school, college, mostly, I started listening to everything, Journey, Police, name the bands of the day. I was listening to it all. My early influences, and my whole thing was I wanted to be somebody that took that and took it to the next level, so that was my idea. I wanted to take Christian rock, and make it a little bit more progressive, a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more, not just plain vanilla, music with plain vanilla Christian lyrics. I wanted more depth, more thought.
There was a lot of art, lyrical art within your music, the lyrics, and very thought-provoking. I kind of had to laugh, Jonathan, when you were talking about listening to the kind of the more of the Jesus music artists, before it transformed into the Christian rock, and your mom what is that? And all that. Well, see, put yourself in my shoes. Mom, it's Novella. It's okay. It's it's
Yeah,
the same thing. Mom, it's Novella. It's Jonathan
right.
Pagano. Jonathan, your voice, very smooth tenor voice. Such a great vocalist. Did you take choir or anything or voice lessons during any of that time, or is this just your natural gift?
I didn't take any kind of lessons. And this may sound weird, but when I was in, let's see, probably later years of high school, early into college, first of all, I had a natural tenor voice, but to get those really high, smooth notes and I started developing how to sing with the support of my diaphragm without even knowing what I was doing. I realized later on what I was doing by singing along to other rock artists. And so, my parents aren't home. I would put, Journey on, some Steve Perry or some Foreigner on, and I would sing along to that. And I kept doing that as an exercise. And, in the beginning, I couldn't hit the high notes. And then as I just continued doing it, I'm fortunate because I did it right. I guess a lot of people start singing wrong and sing through their throat. And I just started singing from my diaphragm to get those high notes, and to be able to get the sustain out of it. So yeah, that's how I did it.
So, Jonathan, with regard to Novella, how did the band first come together, and what was the year?
So I had lots of iterations of bands. So I started with a band called Destiny in college. I went to Oral Roberts University, and we did a lot of rehearsing, a lot of playing out at local events and churches and youth groups and whatnot. And when I got back to New Jersey, I started bands, and I had lots of different musicians coming in and out of my life. And while that was happening, I was writing music and writing songs, and I entered a song contest that was hosted by Pure Metal Records. Okay. And Joey Powers was the producer. Ray Nenow was the owner of the record company. And out of the hundreds of submissions, they chose my song. And at that point in time, I had one version of Novella, which included John Citarelli, great guitar player. And so that record was called The Axeman. It was a compilation record. And so the song that I won, we recorded at Grand Slam Studios, which was Joey Powers' studio in West Orange, New Jersey. And they just threw it on the Axeman, just to finish off the competition, and with no thought beyond that. And as that record the whole record was just being released to different Christian rock stations, that song started a chart on the Christian rock charts at the time. And they were very, very shocked. That's when Ray Nenow came to me and said, "We want to offer you a recording deal." And at the time, the first version of Novella fell apart. And I said, "It's just me." He said, "I don't care. You could be a solo artist." I said, I really don't identify. I never identified as a solo artist. I like the group synergy. And so I signed a deal with him, and I told him that I was going to put a band together and have a band identity and not a solo artist identity. So in the beginning, and really through my whole career, I was the only one signed. I was the only one signed to Pure Metal, the only one signed to Star Song. And in effect, Novella was my band. So when the first version fell apart, I put together another version of the band, which included Steve Paul on the first record as the guitar player. And then on the second record, because he couldn't travel and he had a family, that's when Derek Jan came into the picture, just to kind of quickly go through that. But so that's kind of the overall progression of the band.
Tell us, if you will, a little about how you came to the name Novella. What's behind that?
Yeah, so me and John Citarelli at the time were kicking around names, and I found that very difficult to come up with a band name. And you know, we're both looking at all kinds of different resources, thumbing through different things, you know. And I don't know what I was thumbing through, but the word Novella stuck out at me, and I was like, "That's an interesting name." And I passed it by John, and he was like, "Yeah, I like that." And then I said, "Well, let me really dig into what it means." And so when I realized it was a short story, basically, is what it meant, I was like, "Oh, that's perfect," because we're an evolving story of how God is putting this whole thing together and leading the way. And so that's pretty much it. I found it to be that was probably one of the most difficult parts of the band, was coming up with that name, to be honest with you. Well, because I mean, I saw a lot of names. Keep in mind, that was late 80s. And I always gravitated musically to the music that was interesting, right? And I didn't like the bands that were bubblegum metal pop. So, and not to slam on anybody, but I wasn't a Striper fan, for, you know, whatever that's worth. I was more of a fan of like the Queensryche type music, and the more progressive. But I loved bands like Bon Jovi. I'm from Jersey, so I liked Bon Jovi, right? And so for me, I wanted to meld those two. I wanted to be melodic. I was a big Journey fan, a big Foreigner fan, a big Styx fan, and but I loved the complex. And I realized, look, I didn't want to be a completely progressive, you know, deep into the album Rush type music. You know, I wanted to be more of a pop, melodic, but with interesting music as well. So there's a lot of that influence in our music. There's a lot of influence of the pop side, a lot of influence of the more progressive side. But yeah, that's how that whole thing came about.
Wonderful. Well, I don't know if you mentioned it, Jonathan, but that song that won that contest back then, that was probably Running Home.
It was Running Home, yeah.
Beautiful, wonderful song. Yes, you had scored that contract. You had won a contest and got the contract. It was around 87 with Star Song for that. Is that correct?
No, that was with Pure Metal.
Pure Metal. Okay, I'm sorry.
And what happened was I want to say, because that was in 88. And I want to say by the time the record came out, it was 90, 91. And in the middle of us recording that record, Star Song bought Pure Metal. So the story goes that we're in the studio in New Jersey, and we were at the point where, and you know, it was recording, and then money ran out, and then it was a pause for weeks, and then money showed up, and then we're recording again. And so we got all the way to the finish line where songs were recorded, where in the early mixing stage, Star Song buys us out. Des Dickerson comes to New Jersey to sit in and listen to the record. And he told us flat out that, you know, Star Song bought Pure Metal for White Cross, and they were going to dump every band that was on that was on pure metal. But they were doing their due diligence, going through and seeing. And he said, he went back to Star Song and said, "You're not going to believe what we have in New Jersey." And so with that, we were able to finish the record. It was mixed, and it was released. And yeah,
And
that was
it
the
was
beginning of our short journey.
So Jonathan, what did you guys set out to be a Christian rock band per se, kind of based upon the influences, other bands you had mentioned? Was that what you guys were set out to do, or were you simply being who you were as a Christian and just being a band and just letting what was in your heart just kind of flow through?
Well, I mean, that question is interesting because I know that there's a lot of different approaches from different artists. And on one hand, I can say I'm a human being, I'm a Christian, and I'm musically gifted, talented in certain areas. And so what comes out because I'm human. And I also know that there are other people that go, I want to be a Christian band because I'm a Christian. And then some bands will go, I don't want to be a Christian band. I'm a Christian, but I don't want to be labeled.
Right.
And I didn't look at it like that at all. I just looked at it like, I'm a human being. I write music. My influences are what they are. I'm a devout Christian. And I actually, like I kind of alluded to before, I wanted to be in Christian music because those were my early influences. And I saw myself as somebody that wanted to elevate it to whatever little degree I could, put my little mark on it. Because look, I'm from Jersey. We were playing clubs. We had other opportunities. We could have went the direction of trying to get signed with a major label. But I always believed that God opens doors, and the doors that were open were the doors that were open for me, and I walked through those doors. So
The reason why I asked that question that way, and Michael, I'll get back to you in a second, buddy. Jonathan, I just want you to know the reason why I asked that question in that manner is because to me there was a very distinct creativity and artfulness with the lyrics of Novella compared to the lyrics of a lot of other bands of your peers. And I am not dogging those bands. I think it's all
right.
good.
Right.
You just had a very colorful, flavorful way of presenting lyrics, which was a little different. And so that's what prompted me to ask that question about your, which kind of how Novella was approaching things.
Well, let me expound a little bit upon that, because that's a big part of who I was and who we were. So I probably should have said this when you said, about my background, but my Christian background is very rich. My grandfather started over 300 churches in Italy, okay, back in the 40s, 30s, 40s. And the group of churches that he was part founder of actually became the Assemblies of God denomination in Italy. He pastored 3 different churches on a Sunday, and he was continually starting churches. He was so, I guess, known in Italy at the time that when World War II started, Mussolini arrested him, put him in exile, and he was in jail for the duration of the war. And so that's what I come from, right? And so lyrically, I just did not want to be one of the artists. So I'm saying that just to know that, let you know that my faith was solid from the day I was born. I mean, I was in church. I accepted the Lord very, very early, and my whole life was church. And I wasn't one of those kids that rebelled from it. I loved it. I loved youth group. I loved the people that I hung out with. My friends were mostly all Christians. I didn't grow up in Nashville where everybody's a Christian. I grew up in New Jersey where, nobody says they're a Christian. And if they do, they say, well, I'm Catholic and I go to mass once in a while. So there weren't a lot of Christian influence except within my family and within my church circles. And I loved that. Okay. And growing up listening to Christian music, I heard a lot of Jesus, Jesus, Jesus is Lord. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus is Lord kind of lyrics, which there's nothing wrong with it. I enjoyed it. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to write music that was Jesus, Jesus. I felt like that's already being done. So how can I say the same message, but say it in a way that is a little bit more thoughtful, thought-provoking? I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, it does. Like, for example, even today, one of the criticisms that's out there sometimes in church culture is that a lot of today's worship music is very simple, kind of doesn't have much depth to it. And, sometimes they'll compare it to a lot of the old hymns that had a lot of theological depth to them. Right. And they may not have been the music that we're so much into today, but they just, people go, well, look at the theological depth that existed there compared to what we tend to have in a lot of our worship music today. And so that's kind of what came to my mind when you were talking about that. And I know for me, I appreciate any band that has greater depth than, because you mentioned Striper, and I love Striper, but that's always been one of the things I've acknowledged about them is that their lyrics, especially back in the day, were pretty simple, Right. And I had a greater appreciation for bands maybe like Petra, who you listen to one of their songs, it was like a Bible study,
Right.
And so, and that leads me to a question I was going to ask you is kind of based on what you said you wanted to do and accomplish in music. You referenced some of the artists of the early 70s. But like when you were in the 80s starting to do your thing, were there other bands out there at the time that you did look at and go, I like what they're doing, Christian bands? Obviously you had secular band influences, but I'm wondering if there were Christian bands out there at the time that you kind of took some inspiration from and thought, I like what they're doing,
Yeah, so don't take this as arrogance, but no.
No?
I didn't I was so wedded to what I was formed with, the early Christian music, that I just saw, I listened to the Christian music of that time, and I just thought I just didn't like it. I don't want to sound mean or arrogant. I don't want to come across that way. But I listened to it and I went, I just thought it was all, and I'm talking specifically about the metals, the metal stuff, the late 80s, the stuff especially that was on pure metal at the time that I was listening to. And I'm like, a lot of them sounded to me like garage bands that shouldn't have even been on a label. And there was very few, if any, that I could think of right now that I liked or listened to.
So after the first album comes out, Jonathan, what was the response like, both from like Star Song, and did you guys tour a lot or not, or kind of what was the reaction?
So, the first record, we were nominated for 3 Dove Awards. So we were nominated for New Artist of the Year, Best Rock Record, and Best Album Cover. And when the label, when we walked into the label one day, and the head of marketing, Mike Kyle, great guy, still know him to this day, he told us about the nominations. The first thing they told us was about the New Artist of the Year, because for a rock metal band to get that's kind of unheard of. And they were just shocked. Of course, at the time, you know, we were selling a lot of records at the time. So the first record did real well for us. We toured a lot. We were constantly on the road. And I mean, I gotta say, I think that period, and again, it was just the first record, but that was probably the high point. A Liquid Earth was a little bit of a step down. And as far as record sales and as far as enthusiasm, you know, it was a little disappointing that when we did our first record, and I know we'll get into it, but the record company brought us in after the record was finished for a listening. And so we played a couple of songs off the record for the executives, and they told us flat out, we don't know what to do with you. And that was, and because I didn't have management at the time, I had consultants and I had booking, but I didn't have real management. Real management probably would have said, let's go to another label, because we had interest from other Christian labels that produced rock bands that did really well. So, but it is what it is. That's what happened.
I can remember Jonathan, and I had first heard of Novella when I saw the Axemen compilation. That's when Novella came on my radar, but I had never purchased that compilation. But I always wondered, who is this Novella? And in 1990, I remember, and Mike makes fun of me because he says, dude, you can remember everywhere you go when you first hear a band. So for me, Novella, I was in Little Rock, Arkansas at a Christian bookstore, and I was looking for music, and the store clerk in there, he was asking me what style I liked, and he, lo and behold, it's funny because he was all dressed up in a suit and everything, but I said, well, you know, I like Christian rock and metal, and he recommended Novella.
Nice.
And I said, okay. I said, yeah, I've heard of these guys. And I said, now, Jonathan, I like a wide spectrum of Christian rock and metal, but at that time I was very into melodic stuff. And I said, you know, not so much the screaming type stuff. And I asked him, I said, my exact words were, but the vocalist, I said, are they smooth vocals or what? And he goes, oh yes, very smooth. He wasn't lying, Jonathan. He delivered in spades. I bought One Big Sky in 1990. It was awesome. To me, you guys were in the same vein as classic early King's X. And I mean that as a compliment. You had mentioned something that the label didn't quite know what to do with you guys.
Right.
And at that time, pre-grunge, and you guys were nowhere near grunge, but you know, King's X was one of a kind. And you guys were actually kind of right there with them, because it was hard rock with a tinge of classic metal, and there were progressive elements, you know, but right. Your voice soars. You have your own voice, but it is, you know, I would put it in the same wheelhouse as Steve Perry. It's funny you mentioned Journey, because it's smooth as silk and it just soars, and I can't say enough. So we get One Big Sky. It delivers classics like Running Home, Do We Just Surrender, I Need You, Lay It On Me. Jonathan, how much time was spent in the studio? You mentioned that there were some stops and startups because of funding. So how much time overall in the studio to actually get the album nailed down?
The actual time in the studio without the start and stops, keep in mind too, we also had a rehearsal space. And, you know, we did a lot of keyboard work, and that we tracked and transferred to the studio. So I don't know. I think total actual recording time was probably about a month.
Wow. All the songs recorded in a month?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
That's
because we went in and first tracked drums and guitar. I mean, drums and bass, and then we came in and did guitars. I did a lot of guitar work. Steve Paul did a lot of guitar work. And then we finished it out with vocals and background vocals, and you know, all the sweeteners, and we also mixed it in the same studio. So I want to say total recording time was probably, yeah, no more than 4 weeks.
Awesome. And then Plinky. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. Talk to me a little bit about, if you can, the backstory on the song "Do We Just Surrender"?
Yeah. The music for "Do We Just Surrender," Steve Paul came in and said, "Hey, I got this riff," and he played me the riff, and I was like, "Dude, that's amazing." So he recorded the whole riff and all the musical pieces that he had, you know, just on a cassette. And this was pretty standard. Even John Citarelli did this, would record something. I would take it back to my house, and then I would work on lyrics and melodies for the song, for the musical pieces that they wrote, which were a few. So "Do We Just Surrender" was a song musically that was written by Steve Paul. And I don't know, usually when I'm writing lyrics, I usually like to go into a space. I like to shut out everything, and I like to just listen to the music, and, you know, without sounding weird, kind of let God's influence come in, kind of be open. And so at the time, I was working with my dad, and he had a business in New York City. And I remember going through New York City and seeing at that time, I know it's bad now, but even at that time, were a lot of homeless people just camped in the nice areas, the Upper East Side of New York. And it really had an impact on me. And that's kind of the genesis of what that was, is do we surrender to a world that is turning into something that we didn't know in the past, and are we content to let it continue in the future? And so that's the actual core essence of what that song is about.
Think real, think hard. Do we just surrender to the conscious of you?
Jonathan Plinky Giglio, he produced One Big Sky. And
Okay,
also,
so if you're going to say the name, I know you're not Italian, but it's Giglio.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Forgive me. Forgive me. Giglio.
Yes.
Did I say that? Okay. And
Yeah.
I apologize. I'm not Italian. Guys, I learned something today.
His first name is Salvatore. He used to play with his Plinky when he was a kid, a little kid,
Okay.
and that name stuck with him.
Well, I apologize. And Dale Thompson of Bride, if you're ever watching this, shame on you for not correcting me on your episode when I said his name wrong. So, kidding. Yes, Plinky had also produced, I don't know if you'd seen it, Jonathan, but we had a discussion with Dale Thompson of Bride, and he mentioned that they had gotten Plinky because he had heard his work with your all's albums and really
Right.
appreciated what he did. And so, you know, I'm just going to stick with Plinky, and I apologize for mispronouncing his name. No disrespect meant. He produced One Big Sky and the follow-up album, A Liquid Earth. How did you guys connect with Plinky?
So Joey Powers was the one that produced Running Home on the Axeman. And Plinky used to be his engineer, and he had started his own studio in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and I found out about him because I didn't know that he had worked at Grand Slam Studio. So I found out about him through Adam Gibson, the drummer. And so I went to go talk to him. I just wasn't convinced that Joey, he's a great guy with a big personality, but I wasn't convinced that he can deliver the kind of record that I wanted, and with the technical and because I always strived for the best. I didn't want to just throw stuff together, right? So, and that is, if there's a criticism about musicians, and not everybody, but the artists and the bands that come out with an album every year and constantly, I don't understand that, because for me, it's like childbirth. And of course I'm a man, so I don't know what that's like, but I hear it's tough. So that's what it's like. Writing a song to me is the most grueling thing that I can think of to make it right. I mean, I could throw out any kind of songs, right? But to do it so that it is presentable and top quality, to me, that takes lots of time. So I wasn't convinced. So with that idea of how I like things to be of the best quality that I could produce, I just wasn't convinced that Joey Powers could do that. And so I went and had a conversation with Plinky. I listened to some of his stuff, and I decided, and this was a tough conversation because Joey was really pulling for me with Ray. But I had decided to use Plinky instead of Joey, and I think that the album speaks for itself. It would not have been nearly as good. So that's how Plinky came into play, and you know, he was the other requirement, and couldn't have gotten this out of Joey, was I needed to be the co-producer with him, and he agreed to that. So, you know, and we collaborated on everything through both of the records.
Well,
So would you say then that the end result of both those records was exactly what you wanted?
I mean, I would say it's 90% of what I wanted. Like, I look back now and went, okay, I wish I could have tweaked this here or tweaked that there on some things, but overall, probably 90%. I mean, I don't look back on those and go, they missed the mark, I could have done better. I don't do that.
That's really good, because we've sat here and talked to some artists who, you know, talked about the production of a given album, and they'd say, you know, that really didn't end up the way we wanted it. You know, so it's good to hear that in your case, you got, for the most part, what you wanted.
Well, and again, I think that goes back to the fact that, you know, I wasn't, when I got signed and when that album came out, I wasn't 18 or 20, you know, I was 28 years old. So yeah. And I knew what I wanted. And I was very involved. I wasn't the artist that came in, sang and left, and the producer did all the music. You know what I mean? Yeah. I was extremely involved on everything that was recorded. So.
Well, and you listen to those today, Jonathan, and I've been listening to them for the past several days. They do not sound dated at all. I mean,
thank you.
You play that, and that's how you can tell that an album was done properly, I think, with sonics and production and all of that. When you can play that and you can't say, oh, that sounds like it's over 30 years old. You can't tell that at all with those two albums. They sound great.
Thank you.
I'd just like to state for the record that when One Big Sky came out, Jonathan said he was 28. I was 18, just for the record. So, and I'm almost scared to say this now because I'll probably get it wrong. but I'm curious about One Big Sky's cover artist. Is it David DeVries?
Dave DeVries, yeah.
Okay. Simply an amazing cover. It totally befits the music within, and I'm a big proponent of. I believe a good cover is very important for an album. I think
I
it
agree.
sets the stage for what's in. And boy, One Big Sky had it, and it's a perfect package. Please tell us, Jonathan, with David DeVries, was this something that he specifically created for the album, or was it something from his catalog that you chose from?
He specifically created it for this album. I met with him. He was referred to me. I can't remember by who. I think it was John Citarelli. And he was an up-and-coming artist. And I met him at his studio. And I don't even know if he was a Christian or not. Didn't ask. I saw some of his work and I was blown away by it. I told him what I was and what we were doing, and that I was looking for an album cover. And so he started talking about this sculptured piece that I want to create with paintings inside. And I'm like, okay, that sounds great. And he gave me the whole concept about the tree coming through. And I'm like, that's perfect. The tree of life coming right through the sculpture, amidst, in front of and against the harshness that the world represents. I'm like, this is great. Then I went back to go see it, and it was an actual sculpture with actual paintings. And then it was photographed, and amazing. Of course, I come from the 70s and the 80s, and mostly in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
You had rock groups that obsessed about album covers, and I fell right into that mode, and I wanted it to be consistent. The Journey albums consistent, and so that cover was so amazing that I wanted it for the second record. I wanted consistency. And so this is one of the areas where we go back and I tell you 90%. This is the 90%, because I can't even look at a Liquid Earth's album cover. I can't even look at it. Every time I look at it, my heart sinks, because Star Song. Now keep in mind, let me go back. Placeholder. Understand that for the first record, there was no record company involvement. Ray Meow said, do what you want. Yeah, you want to hire Plinky? Let's hire Plinky. He never even came to the studio. I don't even remember. Maybe he did. I don't remember if he came to the studio. I didn't have the record involvement that I had on the second record, where we had to go through songs. I picked all the songs. Me and Plinky, we did everything. I went and met Dave DeVries. I'm the one that told him, hey, we got $1,000 for you. Give me a cover. There was no record company involvement in any of that. That is 100% me and Plinky on the music, and me on the album cover design and all of that stuff, as far as directing and putting that all together. On the second record cover, there was lots of Star Song input. Now, Des Dickerson was great, okay? I went through all the songs with him. There was no pushback on songs. Where there was pushback was on the album cover, because I was insisting that Dave had to do a follow-up record cover, and they just didn't want to pony up, because at that point Dave was like, now I think he wanted $5,000 for the album cover, and I'm telling Star Song, pay the man his $5,000. It's well worth it. And that's one of the areas where the 58-year-old would have said, I'll pay him the $5,000. But that record cover that you put together is not going to be the record cover. But I went into a meeting with Des because we had a lot of issues with this album cover. there was lots of different designs, and I kept saying, there's no way, you know, look, I'm from Jersey, so things come out pretty direct. And I'm like, there's no way that's going to be the album cover. And then they had, you know, the same guy that was doing all the pure metal record covers that I hated. He did this one, and I'm like, but I hate this. And Des said, well, then we're going to shelf the record. And so, you know, being the younger guy going, you know, with no management, I caved. And that is my one regret. Probably out of both records, that's probably it's definitely the number one regret, maybe be the only one in comparison to anything else.
Well,
Because I wanted that, you know what I mean? I wanted that second record cover that was in that same vein, you know?
no, I get it. I do remember looking, I'll be very honest, Jonathan. Now, let me just say, and I'm putting the cart ahead of the horse. The music certainly did not disappoint on A Liquid Earth. Great stuff. We'll get into that. I do remember looking at the album cover though, and thinking, this is not the same as One Big, you know, this is not in the same ballpark as One Big Sky. I do want to say, I think the biggest detractor for me, I don't care for the big white lettering of Novella across the front. When my eyes see past that and I see the Liquid Earth, you know, what it's representing past that, there are some neat things on there. It's still not the same as One Big Sky, but I think the biggest detractor for me is just the way the lettering is spelled out on the front. But
yeah,
that's just being honest. The music did not disappoint. I'm going to put the cart ahead of the horse again while I'm thinking about it. Mike, did you want to say something?
Oh, I'm good.
Okay.
I would like to ask
Go
something
ahead, Rex.
about, so Jonathan, had you had any kind of preliminary discussions with Dave about a second album cover? Did you have any ideas of what you were thinking about or not? Or did you talk to the...
Didn't even get that far.
Okay.
because he was insistent on getting paid on this one because he wasn't really paid on the first one. And I was totally with him.
Sure.
And so we didn't even get we didn't even get to that phase.
Okay.
But I've had a conversation with him. Now, it wasn't very recently, but the only other time I talked to him was, I want to say it could have been as long ago as 10 years ago. Probably, you know, when Facebook came out and everybody's connecting with everybody, and I had a connection with him and I spoke to him on the phone and we talked fondly back on those days. And I told him, man, I wish I could have had you on the second record. But yeah, so he's an art director at a college there in New Jersey now. And so.
Okay. Well, David DeVries, thank you so much for that wonderful album cover. You mentioned something, Jonathan, made my ears perk up. You said that you and Des Dickerson had culled through the songs. There wasn't any issues regarding the material for The Liquid Earth. Are there remaining studio songs that have not been released that were recorded?
Yeah, no, that's one thing we did not do. We did not record extra songs. I know a lot of artists and a lot of bands do that. They go in and record, you know, maybe 20 songs and then 10. No, when I say that, I mean, he would come to rehearsals and listen to songs. We would record some on a cassette, and there weren't a lot of, because I wasn't that guy. And I told him that I'm not the guy that just sits there and writes, you know, 50 songs and in a day. Like I've already said it. I birthed these songs, you know. The one song though that I give Des credit for is Heaven's on My Mind, because I came out with the guitar, the acoustic guitar riff, and he said, that riff is great, he said, but you don't have a good chorus. I'm like, oh, okay. He says, you've got to develop this a little bit more. And so I went back and developed it more and developed the chorus. And it turned out to be a great song, thanks to his prodding.
And it is. I'm a sucker for acoustic guitar based ballads that are crafted by an otherwise hard rocking band. I think I've always been, I've always been a sucker for those. And so thank you for bringing that up, how that came to fruition. That is a classic song. I remember that got airplay for the video, on
Right.
various Christian rock.
And let me say one other thing about that song.
Mhm.
That's a one-take vocal.
Nice.
Now I did several one takes, but there were no overdubs. That was just a one, sang the whole song through, recorded it, did it several times. We picked the best version of it. And that's what's stuck on the record.
It's beautiful.
Heaven's on my mind. I've left it all behind, and I'll wait for you, 'cause heaven's on my mind.
Reverting back just a little bit on the timeline, in 1991, you all were featured on the Metal Mission video compilation.
Right.
How did your inclusion come about for that release?
Well, that was a compilation that was put on by Star Song, Mike Kyle, who was head of marketing at the time. Put that video together with Stephen Yake, who was the guy who filmed it and directed it, and it was filmed at the Old Lady on Brady in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I knew it before I even went there because I went to Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, and I had been to concerts there. And it's a real old theater, beautiful theater. And it was a promotional video that was put together by Star Song, so that's why I included all Star Song artists: White Cross, Exalt, Bride, and us.
Very cool. So this was during the time of after One Big Sky's release. Now, in support of the album, how far out were you all playing, and what was the duration of the tour for that?
For which one now?
For One Big Sky?
Well, leading up to it, there wasn't a lot of touring leading up to the record. Mostly what we were doing at that time was playing at local events. We did play a lot of local bars and clubs, and after that record, we had decided to move to Nashville, and the touring on that record wasn't as extensive until Steve Paul left and we brought Derek in, because Steve just wasn't able to travel. And then once Derek came in, we started touring quite a bit. Of course, we did the festival circuits in the summers, and we played Flavo in Holland, which was a big festival, several times. Spring Rock in Europe as well. So it wasn't until Derek came in that we actually really played a lot.
Okay, so Derek Jan, he came in then for the tour after One Big Sky was released. He came in for the tour in support of that album.
Right.
Okay, because of course, in 1992, we were blessed with the band's sophomore release, A Liquid Earth. The music certainly did not disappoint. And I need to mention, we had bassist John Spinola on the first album, drummer Adam Gibson, yourself on guitar and lead vocals, and Derek Jan was added on guitar. He was shown within that album. So recording then for A Liquid Earth, you mentioned it was relatively a month for One Big Sky. Was the recording process for A Liquid Earth, was that a shorter or longer duration than One Big Sky?
I want to say it was probably about the same length because we tracked it in New Jersey, and then we did all the guitars and the vocals in Nashville, and the mixing in Nashville as well. So my recollection is that it was probably a week of tracking, maybe 3 weeks, couple of weeks of overdubs and guitars and whatnot, and then another week of mixing.
Okay.
That's my recollection.
Go ahead, Rex.
Jonathan, my favorite song from you guys is Bad Place from A Liquid Earth. The drums in the beginning, I don't know how you did that, but can you talk about that song specifically if you have any specific memories? But that is just a fist pumping in the air song. I just love that song.
So when we were writing for that record, it was a lot different than the first record because Derek was involved at this point, and that was one of the musical pieces that he brought to the table. And I don't know, I enjoyed getting the band together in rehearsal and just throwing out ideas. Let's try this, let's try that, let's do it this way. I just didn't like canned, traditional, this is the way it's done type stuff. I just like different, unique ways of approaching music. And I loved doing that on intros, on outros. And so, yeah, with Bad Place, that was an idea. The drum idea, of course, came from Adam. And he, when I listened to both records, he was good on the first record. He was fabulous on the second record. His chops, but he took his drumming serious. And so in between both records, he spent a lot of time, and he really developed as a drummer between the first and the second record, and that just shows, especially on a song like that.
Yeah, that's like I said, that's just, I can listen to that song, just put it on repeat, and I do not get tired of it. That I just love it. And
it's funny you mentioned, Jonathan, the drumming of Adam. A Liquid Earth, to my personal listening experience, I mean, the overall tempo of the whole album, it clips along at a faster pace than the songs on One Big Sky. Now, One Big Sky is a masterpiece, and the songs, I mean, you guys just took the time to let the songs breathe and all that. In a different way, I mean, A Liquid Earth is wonderful because the songs overall they clip along at a faster pace. We have story, I mean, that unique rhythm to that song, and Adam's rolling in on the drums, and here we go, and we're off to the races, and Bad Place, Don't You Run. I mean, those three songs serve to me as a triple threat introducing that album, and they take no prisoners as the album opens up. And this generally faster tempo, was it a conscious effort for the album? And the album's a little bit leaner. Song, what am I trying to say? And again, where the songs breathe on One Big Sky, the songs are a little bit more lean and mean, if you will, on A Liquid Earth. So was all this a conscious effort while crafting the songs, or was this just the result of the muse as it flowed?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a thought or a conversation that, hey, let's make sure the songs are like this time. That didn't happen. I think it was more of the process that we went through with Derek involved, because he musically came to the table, like I said, with Bad Place, with one of my favorites, Fire in the House. And he did most of the guitar work on that record versus the first record, where I did, at least half of the guitar work. And so I think it's just an influence of Derek being involved versus Steve Paul being involved on the first record.
Gotcha. The touring itinerary for following a Liquid Earth's release, did you guys have the full support of the label? You know, how was that looking like during that time? And what I'm wondering, Jonathan, the reason why I'm asking where I'm going with this is I'm wondering, you guys delivered two great albums, two superb albums, and your music, I will always contend this, it was not the mold. You guys were anything but the mold. You guys were offering something unique. And so I'm wondering, I mean, I was so pleased in 92 when A Liquid Earth appeared. Things seemed to be trucking right along, and then I never heard from Novella again. So what I'm wondering is, touring for A Liquid Earth, did you have tour support? How long did you tour for? And what is the reasoning behind Novella never showing back up for us again?
Yeah. Well, that was a difficult time for us because remember, that record started with the record company telling us we don't know what to do with you. So when you have your own record company saying that, that's not good. You know, you want to hear the record company say, hey, these are the plans that we have for you. This is how we want to proceed. We want to get you on tour with a bigger artist, blah, blah, blah. We're going to give you tour support. So none of that happened. So we were left to continue putting together. I had a booking agent that was all in-house. We took everything in-house. And so we were playing out, and to be honest with you, it just got more and more difficult. And it wasn't long after that Des came to me and said, you know, it's time to start thinking about another Novella record. And I was like, again, remember, my philosophy is I'm not just throwing a record out every year. I'm not doing that. I mean, if you come out with what you think is a great record, right? You should be able to tour off of that record for a couple of years. And again, a lot of that was my naivete, my not understanding that, you know, when you're only selling 100,000 records, you got to put out a record every year. I didn't understand that because the record company wants to make their little bit of money, whatever they determine they're going to make off of you. They want to do that every year, right? Because they've got numbers that they've got to meet and all of that, right? And so that was not even on my radar screen. As much as a businessman that I was before I got into it and after I got out of it, I was a complete artist when it came to that. And I was a stubborn artist. I wanted things my way. And so that was one of the things. So it got to the point where it got so lean for us as far as booking dates and whatnot, that I had made a decision to strip things down and do an acoustic tour with just me and Derek. And so we did that for a whole year. And that was real successful. We opened up for the Newsboys a lot of times. We played lots of festivals. We went back to Europe. We did a lot. At the same time, not too far after that, Des approached me about a solo record, and I did with a couple of different artists who were producers as well. Went in and did some music, but again, I was too stubborn. I was too in the mold of I want to pick my guy. I want to go in and I want to write all the music, and I want to go in and I want to record it the way I want to record it. And I want a great producer who's going to work with me. That was my mold. That's how I started, you know? So it was very difficult for me to sit in with Steve Griffith, for example, from Vector, who produced a couple of songs as a solo artist. And I'm sitting there in the back, just on the couch, while he's there doing all the music. And I'm looking at it going, yeah, no, I'm not doing this. This is not who I am, you know? So that happened a couple of times with a couple of different artists. That happened with David Safaro from Blood Good. I did a couple of things with him too under Dez's direction, and it just went nowhere. I ended up meeting with Star Song. They were considering having me as a solo artist, and then they decided against it, and probably for the better. Because I probably would have said yes again, because my philosophy is if the door opens, go through the door. But that was probably one of the things I should have just said no to from the beginning. So right after that record, the actual full band thing fizzled pretty quickly. It transitioned into an acoustic thing. That lasted for about a year. And then after that, that little stint of thinking, should I be a solo artist on Star Song, ended. And then I just started, I had a lot of music at the time, and I just did my own thing. I started a label, so to speak, and I produced 2 records and got distribution and did my own thing.
So Shadow Dance was released in '94 and Push in '96. I mean,
Right.
tell us about those, Jonathan.
So Shadow Dance was more of a throwback to my early piano music days. And it wasn't really meant necessarily for the Novella audience. It was meant for me to go out and tour and play churches more. And I did that, and I enjoyed doing that. And then when I decided to do Push, I decided I wanted to do something that was a cross between, say, a Shadow Dance type thing and Novella. I wanted it to be poppy. I wanted it to be a little bit more aggressive. I didn't want it to be metal. I wanted it to be rock. And that's when I sat down with Plinky and said, help me do a top-notch record, where Shadow Dance was a week, maybe 10 days, you know. Push ended up being another one of those 30-day, 4-week type in the studio projects that I really enjoyed putting together.
Jonathan, I've noted there's some pictures of you and Adam and John reconvening together in 2014, and that was 22 years after A Liquid Earth was released. Was this simply a jam session, or were you guys making more plans for Novella to resurface?
Well, I mean, the idea was about 7-8 years ago, I had got the bug to, hey, we have 2 records out. We have to have 3. How do you not have a trilogy, the 3 records? How do you just have 2? And so we got together in Indianapolis at Adam's house for a weekend. We of course, started off by playing some of our music, you know, just the 3 of us. And then I had a few musical pieces and ideas that we started kind of just jamming through. With the intention of reconvening, and reality really struck after that weekend. And the reality is, when you're in your 20s and have no responsibilities, you could be a full-time musician and eat ramen noodles and peanut butter and not care. But when you're 50 and have a family and 3 kids and a house and a business, and I always had a love-hate relationship with my music, and I tell people this, and most people don't understand this, but it is what it is. I love my music and I hate my music. I love playing it. And this happens to this day. I'll be playing something, I'll have an idea. I have so many musical pieces right now and so many songs right now. And even in December, I met with a studio guy here to do another Novella record. So that's a thought. It's on the burner. It's an idea. But every time I pursue that, I'll wake up the next day and go, what are you thinking? It's because unlike back then, there's the potential of it being a fledgling career. It may not be one that you're going to be fabulously wealthy at, but it's one that can sustain you for a while maybe even you do other things. But now it's a pure, it's purely for the emotion, desire, passion, you know, and it's a money pit. It's a money pit. And none of those things are a problem. I can finance it. I've got the songs. I've got the passion. But as an older man, you wake up the next day and go, yeah, no, there's no way. Because for me, it's, again, it always goes back to, it's not, you go in this, I see guys do it. I don't know how they do it. It's not, I don't go into the studio and hire a bunch of guys or bring John in and Adam in and sit back and go home and go, okay, yeah, I'll come back and hear, you know, what you guys laid down tomorrow morning, and maybe sing on the track and play some guitar for an hour or two and then rush it out for pressing. That's not me. I'm totally absorbed and involved in it because they're my babies, those songs. And so the thought of going through that birthing process again, while I'm writing the song, the euphoria of the new idea, going, this is just unbelievable. This is great. Where did this even come from? This is beautiful, is one thing. Then when the reality hits later on of what it means to actually put it on a record and do all the work, it's that battle that's caused me to not have a third record.
I didn't know, Jonathan, with with all due respect to, you know, the type of artist and creator that you are, certainly paying respect to that. I just didn't know with modern technology, I don't know the space between you and John and Adam, that I didn't know if there was a way that maybe Adam could lay down drum tracks where he's at. And then you see where I'm going with this.
I see. And the problem with that is I'm 58 and I grew up with 2-inch tape on a reel,
yeah,
with an engineer who knew how
Analog.
to, I mean, our first record, he's splicing tape and, you know, I totally missed, and I was never the engineer type. I was never the one to sit in the engineer's chair and go, look, I can do it too. There are artists that have that ability. Like, I don't. So if I had that ability, we'd probably be saying, hey, the 5th Novella record, let's talk about that. You know, I don't have that ability, and I never wanted that ability. Every time I sat in front of the console, I was just like, that's the fader. Okay, I'll push that up. What's this knob do? And he would tell me, and it would just go right over my head. And I'm not dumb. I'm an intelligent man. I mean, I have a business that's very, that takes a lot of thought, takes a lot of skill, takes a lot of knowledge. But for some reason, I had a mental block when it came to the soundboard and anything technical when it came to, because again, it also came to, look, I'm not looking to just put anything on tape. I want it to be the best that it could possibly be. That's not going to be me. I don't know how to put the best on tape or on digital. There are other people know how to do that. I don't, you know?
Yeah. Jonathan, tell us a little bit about what you are doing these days. What you mentioned about being good at business and stuff like that. So tell us a little bit about what you are doing these days.
Yeah, so just go back a little bit. Before Novella, I owned 2 businesses in New Jersey, and I sold those businesses to when I moved down to Nashville. So, and even during the Novella period, you know, I did all the business. It was basically Novella was my band. I was the one signed. I'm the one that brought the members together. They were on payroll, so to speak. So when we played shows, they got paid. And so my mind has always been business. I have this perfect, I think, left-right brain balance. Some people are just left, some people are just right brain. I can do both and do them well. And so as the band was winding down, and as the solo stuff was winding down, I decided, okay, now it's time to have a career. I was married at that point, I want to say about 4 years, and we were either expecting our first child or close to it, because he was born 5 years into our marriage. So, you know, I was of the mindset, now I've got to have a career. And so there was a couple of different strengths that I had, and I was trying to decide between which direction to go into. And I eventually decided to go into finance. And so right now, I have a financial planning firm with a business partner, and we manage retirement assets, and we have pre-retirees and retirement clients that we help develop retirement income plans and strategies, as well as manage their retirement dollars. So that's a little niche within financial planning, which is just dealing with those type of people. And I've been doing that since, well, for 21 years.
Jonathan, reverting back, you were talking about that trilogy. What would the third title be if there was a third Novella album? We had One Big Sky, Liquid Earth. Did you ever have a working title maybe for a third
I
album?
do. Yeah.
May I ask what that is, or could you tell me?
Sure. The Magnificent Sun.
Magnificent Sun. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, we need to get a campaign going for the Magnificent Sun.
Well,
Very cool.
and are you just saying, Jonathan, that you need an engineer that you would like trust and be able to work with? Does that sort of seem to be the whole sticking point kind of with the third album situation?
Well, no, because like I said, in December, I met with Steve Lewicki, who is steeped in Christian music and different venues as a guitar player for lots of artists. And he has a studio here in Nashville, and I met with him, and he was real excited to start work on another Novella record. No, it's more I can't wake up the next day and go, what the heck was I thinking yesterday? You know what I mean? It's that thing. I have to have a sustained passion in order to see it through, because I know I've said it, but to repeat, I know what it's going to take to do it the way I wanted to do it. I don't want to get into the studio and start recording a week or so and then go, yeah, this is not even, I would never release anything that we're doing now. It's not coming out well. I just know how much time and effort and energy it takes. And that's the sticking point.
So, Jonathan, I mean, I know, it's evident that you love the Lord and listen to the Lord. I can't speak for God, but, we can hold out hope that maybe should it come to pass. I mean, if he leads you, and of course, when he leads us, it's going to stick. And so, holding out hope for the Magnificent Sun one day. Let me ask you this, though. I know that, have you ever been approached by, say, somebody from Girder Music or from Boone's Overstock about remastering and re-releasing One Big Sky or Liquid Earth?
I mean, I have been approached by some people and have been asked by other people about that. And the problem with that is that's completely out of my control. The masters are owned by Capitol Christian Music. And I even had a conversation with them, I want to say 7 or 8 years ago, about it. You know, I'm like, why isn't our music at least why is it not on iTunes or any of the services? People ask me all the time about it. And so we got 2 days into conversations and they couldn't find my contract, and I had to send them my contract, and they wanted to know if the albums were recouped. And I'm like, why would you want to know that at this point anymore? Who cares? I never saw a dime. So whatever money came in, the record company kept. So at this point, we're talking about small little royalties. Just pay me the royalty.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about huge money. You're talking about pennies. Well, you want to keep the pennies until what? You get another couple of thousand.
Right.
You know, our records only cost 10 grand, so it's not like the records cost $100,000. So, and then I never heard from them. And again, I'm busy, so I stopped pursuing.
So you don't you don't own the masters then, right?
No. No.
Well, the reason
I mean,
why
I only own the masters for my music, the solo stuff, not the stuff that's Star Song produced.
Part of the reason why I was asking is, just, some companies that do remasters for classic albums, of which Novella has 2 great classic albums. The other thing, though, was thinking about the cover for A Liquid Earth, because a lot of times they will, and again, I don't mean to imply that cover is horrible, but yes, it is not the same, as we agree, with One Big Sky. But I do know, for instance, a gentleman named Scott Waters, wonderful graphic designer, and he is a fan of, Christian rock and metal. He lovingly devotes his heart into the creative process. And so I was just thinking, if we ever did see a remastered, refurbished Liquid Earth, I mean, just thinking about, there's that chance for that cover.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, if that ever happened, I would insist that second record, and I'd probably go back to Dave DeVries and say, look, how much do you want? Here it is. Give me a record cover that matches, that belongs. And while you're at it, give me a third one.
That's right. Jonathan, are you still, you told us about your financial services that you offer. Are you doing music of any kind at all? Do you play out anywhere just locally or anything of that nature today?
So from 2014 up until maybe a year and a half ago, I was leading praise and worship at 2 different churches. Well, not simultaneously. It was one church, and then I went to another startup church. And so, I was very involved in praise and worship. Outside of that, in this time period, I've done a couple of Novella acoustic sets for different, it wasn't a lot, maybe 5 over the past, 7-8 years. And I still write music all the time. I mean, I have my acoustic guitar right there in the next room, and I pick it up, and I've got finished. I mean, I also thought about just recording it acoustically and throwing it up on Facebook or whatnot. So I've got music, and I've been very involved in music for the past 7-8 years. Yeah.
I'm willing to
John-
bet there'd be quite a bit of interest in that if you did that.
Yeah.
If you start just putting some of your songs acoustically out there on Facebook or something, I bet you.
You think so?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Jonathan, with regard to Shadow Dance and Push, and I forgive my ignorance, please. Do you have a personal site where fans who maybe weren't aware of those can order directly from you or something like that? Or do you still have that those available?
I still do. I don't have a site. The only thing I have is I have a personal site that's kind of a combination of my finance business and my music. The music side of it isn't really developed that much. So yeah, the answer is yes, I have a site. No, I don't have any of my music that's available for purchase. I mean, usually people will, send me an email, or once in a while send me a message in Messenger. Where can I get it? And I usually just mail it out to them.
So if fans would like to connect with you in some way, is the best way through your Facebook site or through the Novella Facebook site?
Probably mine, because the Novella, I get a lot of messages that, quite frankly, I'm not on top of as much as my own site. So, like the Novella site, and come over if you have a question or any comments, and do it on my personal Facebook site.
So Jonathan, may I have permission then, may we have permission under the description when this episode posts, may we put your Facebook page for you and for Novella? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we will
Absolutely.
definitely do that. Guys, anything else?
I think
Well,
we're good.
Jonathan, were you saying something, Mike? I'm sorry.
I just said I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay. Jonathan, you have blessed us. I mean, 2 classic albums, very unique in scope and music, certainly delivered musically. The progressive tinges combined with the hard rock and the metal-esque passages through the music. Not to mention they ministered to us. Thank you. Thank you and John and Adam and Derek for ministering to us through those albums. They certainly blessed us. So thank you.
Well, I also want to say I appreciate you guys, what you're doing, the fact that you reached out to me. Times and days go by where you go, was I even impactful in any way through my musical time? And so hearing from you guys and asking me questions and reliving those times is fun. And I appreciate it. It's good to know that the music, look, we do it because we want to impact people, and we want people to have been touched and moved by the music, and experience God in a different way than you would with another artist. And so hearing that from you guys brings a lot of joy. So I appreciate that.
You and the Novella guys certainly blessed with a creative gift. And, it's interesting when we think about it. I mean, we have a creator and we're made in his image. And I think that's why we are creative people.
That's right.
It's kind of
That's
coming
right.
through our Father. And, Jonathan, we always like to honor the Lord with scripture closeout, and Mike's actually our resident minister, and we'll do a scripture closeout with Mike. But if you don't mind, when we finish that up, just before you completely move away from us, I'll stop the episode, and then if you don't mind, we'll discuss briefly off camera. So,
Okay.
Mike, if you would, buddy, take us home.
Sure. So it was really interesting to hear you say why you came to the name Novella, because as I was thinking about what scripture to use, I got to thinking about what novella means. So, and that led me to bring this scripture today, which is Hebrews 12:2, which says, let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So kind of exactly what you said about, you know, God working out our stories, our journeys over time, you know.
Right.
That's exactly what that took me to, was Jesus being the author and perfecter of our faith. So.
You know, and I can't help but think about the song Story, you know, from Novella, from Jonathan. I mean, each one of us is I guess, a little individual book that God wrote.
Right.
You know, we're a story about when it all began. So anyway, man, I love that song. Such a great rhythm, such a great rhythm. Anyway, Jonathan, it's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you for giving us the time of day, and thank you for ministering to us, and to everybody in Novella. Thank you. So thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we're going to close it out here.